Mass deportations just started. These countries are expelling thousands. Not every border is open, and not every visa guarantees the right to stay. Around the world, governments are tightening immigration compliance, scaling up removals, and retooling their systems to prioritize faster decisions and faster exits when people fall out of legal status. Today's countdown isn't legal advice, and it isn't about fear. It's a clear, practical look at 10 countries where enforcement pressure is widely reported to be intense, where status lapses can trigger detention or removal, and where documentation discipline really matters if you plan to travel, study, or work. Laws change, procedures vary by city or region, and individual outcomes depend on case details, but understanding the overall enforcement posture can help you make smarter choices. Stay to the end. The top slot might not be what you expect, and along the way you'll hear concrete, real-world factors that increase or reduce risk. Things like overstay rules, employer liability, identity verification, and the impact of border pressure on asylum processing. If this kind of global, data-driven breakdown helps you, tap subscribe so you don't miss our deep dives on grace periods, fines, and status recovery options in different regions. Let's begin. 10. Malaysia. Malaysia's immigration environment blends modern city life with old-school, boots-on-the-ground enforcement, and the combination produces a very specific risk profile for anyone who lets their paperwork slip. On paper, Malaysia offers attractive pathways for workers across manufacturing, services, and construction, and it remains a hub for regional labor mobility. In practice, though, the country is known for worksite inspections and targeted raids that check identity documents, work authorization, and visa validity in real time. If your documentation is expired, mismatched with your current employer, or simply not on you when officers arrive, you can be detained first and sort things out later. That immediacy is why travelers and workers repeatedly emphasize document hygiene in Malaysia. Keep your original passport secure but accessible, carry any required cards or certified copies your employer provides, and make sure your sponsor's records and your actual role match the visa category you hold. Overstays are another major factor. Malaysia's system treats overstays seriously, and penalties can include detention, fines, deportation, and blacklisting, with the blacklist potentially affecting future travel to the country. People sometimes assume a short overstay can be smoothed over with a fee at the airport, but that expectation can be dangerously outdated depending on your specific circumstances. Frontline officers have discretion to escalate when rules are clear. Employers are not bystanders in this environment. Employer liability means companies are expected to keep their house in order: contracts, quota compliance, medical checks where required, and timely renewals. If your employer drifts out of compliance, you can be pulled into an enforcement situation even if you personally kept good records, because sponsorship in Malaysia ties your status to the company's standing. The housing and neighborhood where you live also matters more than most people expect. In areas known for lower cost, high-density accommodations for workers, ID checks can be more frequent, and informal subletting without proper registration can add friction when you need proof of address at a government counter. On the flip side, Malaysia periodically runs amnesty or regularization programs to move people from irregular to regular status, but those windows come with hard deadlines, strict eligibility, and queues you don't want to join on the final day. Missing an amnesty deadline can make your situation worse than before, because it draws attention to your case without delivering the fix you hoped for. If you're considering Malaysia, practical steps help a lot. Confirm your entry category, tourist versus work versus dependent, before you fly. Avoid mixing work on a tourist entry. Ensure your offer letter precisely matches your visa category. And insist on seeing the actual approval and not just an email screenshot. Keep digital scans of everything, including your sponsor's key letters, and learn the renewal timetable so you don't rely on last-minute miracles. Malaysia is workable and rewarding for those who track the details. It's punishing for those who don't. That combination, routine workplace checks, serious overstay penalties, and sponsor-linked status, is why Malaysia opens our list. 9. Turkey. Turkey is a country of contradictions for migrants and visitors, a vibrant, dynamic economy and a global tourism hotspot that also serves as a major transit corridor between continents. That strategic location shapes enforcement. Authorities balance hospitality with control, and when policy tightens, you feel it most through residence permit scrutiny and ID checks that can be both targeted and random, especially in metros and provinces under pressure. Many newcomers assume getting a short-term residence permit will be a straightforward, repeatable process, but in Turkey the criteria and the local practice can shift. What worked last year in one district may not fly this year in another. Timelines for appointments, expectations for proof of funds, proof of address, and the acceptability of particular lease formats have all seen periods of change. People who get caught out often share the same pattern: they underestimate timing. Expired residence cards, pending renewals without proper application receipts, or incomplete address registration can trigger detention and removal, particularly if stops or inspections reveal gaps. The second big dynamic is Turkey's role as a transit hub. That means both border and interior controls respond to regional events, and public order considerations can change the tone of enforcement quickly. When pressure rises, detention centers and expedited removal channels are more visible in public reporting, and appeals windows can feel compressed by the speed of the process. This isn't about painting Turkey as hostile, it's about recognizing that your paper trail must be airtight. Keep your rendezvous, appointment, confirmations, application barcodes, and fee receipts organized and printable. Make sure your lease is the correct format for address registration and that the landlord's documents are legit. A too cheap, too casual arrangement can unravel at the worst possible time. Students and remote workers are a specific case. Mixing work activities with a non-work status, even informally, can create problems later when you seek to switch categories or renew. If your plan is to stay long-term, think in steps. Secure the right permit for your primary activity first, then switch status with full documentation, rather than living in a gray zone. Turkey can be navigated successfully with patience and precision. Book appointments early, keep originals and notarized copies, maintain online and paper duplicates, and enroll with a local attorney if your case becomes complex. In a system where province-to-province practice varies, having both proof and persistence is your edge. That mix, transit hub realities, evolving residence rules, and the importance of documentary discipline, earns Turkey the 9th spot. 8. United Arab Emirates. The UAE is one of the world's most digitally efficient immigration ecosystems, and that is both its greatest advantage and the reason lapses are dealt with swiftly. If your status is current, renewals are timely, and your sponsor manages documents correctly, the UAE feels seamless. Smart gates, app updates, and text alerts. But the same efficiency means overstay fines can accrue automatically, and systems can flip you from compliant to non-compliant the day a grace period ends. The sponsorship model is central here. Most expatriates are linked to an employer or a family sponsor, and status changes, like job loss, job switch, or marital status updates, must be reflected quickly in the system. The country is known for clear grace periods after employment ends, but those periods aren't infinite, and assuming a handshake agreement with a new employer will hold while paperwork lags is a common mistake. If a proposed transfer stalls or a new offer falls through, you can hit the grace period wall without realizing it, and once you're over, daily fines may start, along with a requirement to exit, pay, and re-enter with fresh authorization. Another often misunderstood angle is the paperwork behind the scenes. Medical checks, Emirates ID biometrics, insurance, and labor approvals are interlocking parts. A delay in one can hold up the others. People get into trouble when they believe a single confirmation email means they're done. In reality, you want final approvals visible in the portal and the residence permit issued before you relax. For families, the same rule applies across dependents. If the principal's status changes, dependent status needs syncing immediately to avoid cascading lapses. The UAE also runs periodic status normalization initiatives, but those are not permanent safety nets. Missing deadlines or misinterpreting eligibility can compound risk rather than relieve it. On the employer side, companies are obligated to keep accurate contracts, wages, and end-of-service settlements. A sponsor who drags their feet on cancellations or transfers can leave you stuck. If your relationship with a sponsor becomes strained, get professional help early rather than hoping it will fix itself. Practically, people who succeed in the UAE follow a simple checklist. Track your visa expiry in a calendar with multiple reminders. Don't resign without understanding your grace period. Insist on seeing the labor contract in the official system. Keep your health insurance active because it often gates other steps. And avoid informal work during a visit or tourist entry. The UAE is fair but rules first. The system is designed to move quickly, and that speed cuts both ways. The clarity, the grace periods, and the automatized fines structure, paired with sponsor-linked status, put the UAE 8th on our countdown of high enforcement environments. 7. Greece. Greece sits on key migration routes, and that frontier reality shapes every part of the enforcement picture. When border pressure intensifies, you see it in interceptions at sea and land borders, in identity verification, and in the strain on asylum processing. People sometimes imagine Greece as just the postcard images of islands and ruins, but if you engage with the system, whether as an asylum seeker, a seasonal worker, or a student, you discover a landscape where queues, backlogs, and location-specific rules define your experience. For individuals in irregular status or with rejected claims, detention and removal are real risks, and timelines can feel abrupt when compared to expectations shaped by social media anecdotes. The crucial nuance with Greece is the role of NGOs and legal aid. Access to informed counsel varies by region, and language support is not uniformly available. A well-prepared case with the right documents, translations, and evidence can produce a very different outcome than a similar case presented in a hurry without supporting papers. That's not unique to Greece, but because the country bears a disproportionate share of border management for the EU, the margin for error can feel smaller. If you're coming to Greece for studies or legitimate seasonal work, the advice is straightforward: front-load your effort. Make sure your acceptance letters, insurance, accommodation proofs, and financial support are genuine, consistent, and properly translated. Know the renewal windows and never assume a pending request will protect you indefinitely. Follow up and produce whatever supplementary documentation a regional office asks for. For those who entered irregularly, the dynamic is tougher. Policy conversations about reception conditions, returns, and solidarity with other EU members can change the day-to-day posture on the ground, and individuals often underestimate how quickly they can be moved between facilities or how limited their communication may be during those movements. The respectful takeaway is simple: a system under pressure narrows flexibility. If you have a pathway, work sponsorship, studies, family reunification, use it with precision. If you are seeking protection, connect with reputable legal organizations early, keep copies of everything, and understand that missed appointments or gaps in address registration can derail your case. Greece's placement at 7 reflects that border state urgency, the high visibility of interceptions and removals, and the importance of legal representation in navigating outcomes. 6. Italy. Italy combines the warmth and complexity of Mediterranean life with a maritime enforcement reality that's been center stage for years. Because a significant share of irregular arrivals occur by sea, you'll see periodic spikes in interceptions, transfers to reception centers, identity checks, and medical screenings. That maritime focus influences the whole system. When arrivals surge, administrative energy pivots toward triage and processing, and timelines for other categories, like certain permits or renewals, can feel stretched in some provinces and smoother in others. Policy in Italy is detailed and decree-driven. governments have, at times, extended detention periods, adjusted procedures, and changed coordination with NGOs and EU partners. For people seeking protection, the difference between a stable legal pathway and a precarious one often comes down to documentation discipline, timely legal assistance, and a realistic plan for where you'll reside while your case is pending. For students and workers coming through official channels, Italy is totally manageable, but you must be clear about your visa category and avoid the temptation to work outside that category. A student who takes on unauthorized work or a seasonal worker who switches employers informally can find themselves blocked when they later apply for something more permanent. Identity verification isn't just about carrying an ID. It's about having consistent data across your passport, tax code, lease, and employment records. If your name, birth date, or address varies from document to document due to translation or rushed registration, that inconsistency can slow things down or lead to denial. Italy's housing market is another practical piece of the puzzle. In tourist-heavy cities, short-term rentals dominate, and newcomers sometimes sign informal sublets that don't support proper registration. When it's time to renew a permit or apply for a different one, a shaky residence proof can be fatal to your timeline. The best defense is to work with reputable agencies or landlords who provide contracts that meet the local anagrafe, civil registry, requirements. Italy's enforcement posture is not a monolith. Region-to-region differences are real, and local prefectures carry substantial weight in how quickly files move. But the through line is clear. When maritime arrivals increase, the system's patience for irregularities elsewhere tends to shrink. If you plan to be in Italy long-term, invest up front in clean paperwork, proper codice fiscale, health coverage if your category requires it, and a lease you can defend on paper. Italy lands at 6 because of the sea arrival context, the policy churn around detention and processing, and the practical consequences for those who try to improvise their status late in the game. 5. France. France blends a sophisticated administrative state with an immigration system that can move quickly when it assigns priority to removals, especially on public order grounds or after formal findings that someone must leave. If you live or work in France, you already know the power of prefectures, regional authorities that control much of your experience. For applicants in good standing, prefectures are the gateway to residence cards, renewals, and category switches. For those who overstay or lose eligibility, prefectures can issue obligations to leave with specific timelines, and ignoring those timelines makes a difficult situation worse. The biggest mistake people make in France is underestimating the paperwork culture. The country doesn't just ask for documents. It asks for documents in exactly the format it expects: originals and certified copies, official translations where required, proof of address that follows specific rules, and evidence of continuous residence rather than last-minute lease registrations. People who treat these details as optional discover that appeals feel shorter and outcomes feel harsher. Another nuance is France's identity checks in certain contexts. While daily life can feel relaxed, checks are lawful in defined circumstances, and if your file contains contradictions, like mismatched identities or inconsistent entry histories, you can move quickly from interview to administrative detention while authorities sort things out. The country also runs priority tracks for certain categories of removal, and while there are robust legal protections and avenues for counsel, you need time and paper on your side. France's social services and labor market can be a huge draw, and many people thrive there: students who follow the rules, skilled workers with clean sponsorship, and families who meet reunification criteria. If you're in those categories, the strategy is simple: submit early, submit complete, and respond to any prefecture letter immediately rather than letting it sit. Maintain pristine proof of domicile, utility bills in your name, official attestations, and not just informal sublets. Keep tax filings up to date if applicable, and carry consistent identification at all times. For those outside status, the country's administrative efficiency is what moves it higher in our list. Once a prefecture decides removal is the outcome, the machinery can work faster than you expect, and re-entry bans are not theoretical. France earns the 5th spot because it combines procedural sophistication with the capacity to act decisively, and in that environment the difference between safety and risk isn't luck, it's documentation, timing, and attention to detail. 4. Germany. Germany sits at the heart of Europe, and when it comes to immigration enforcement, it reflects both the country's administrative thoroughness and its position within the wider European Union. The first thing to understand is that Germany does not operate a single, uniform immigration system in practice. Instead, you're dealing with a federal structure where each Bundesland, state, and often each local Ausländerbehörde, foreigner's office, interprets and implements rules with its own flavor. That variation is both an opportunity and a risk. If you land in a state with efficient offices and well-trained caseworkers, you may find processes like visa conversions or extension applications straightforward, even supportive. But if you're in an overburdened city office, delays and stricter interpretations can make your life complicated. From the perspective of removals, Germany's approach is layered. For individuals whose applications for asylum or residence permits are rejected, there is a spectrum of possibilities. Temporary toleration called dulging, which means you're technically required to leave but removal is suspended, or active Abschiebung, deportation, which can be carried out if conditions align. Germany has historically balanced humanitarian considerations with enforcement, but recent policy pushes have focused on accelerated procedures for certain categories, particularly for people deemed to have little chance of success in the asylum system or those identified as security or public order risks. These accelerated procedures are precisely why Germany earns a high place on this list. When the government decides to move fast, the system has the legal tools and the logistical capacity to do so. One of the most striking aspects of Germany's enforcement culture is the use of charter flights coordinated at both national and European levels. These flights are not everyday occurrences for most people, but they are visible in the media and send a clear signal. When the government organizes removals, it does so with significant resources. The symbolism is as strong as the practical effect. Yet, Germany is not just about crackdowns, it also provides multiple integration pathways. If you qualify, you can stabilize your status through work contracts, family ties, studies, or humanitarian grounds. This duality is critical. The same system that can deport in groups also offers residency upgrades for those who play by the rules and fit into the right categories. The danger lies in assuming you can drift indefinitely in the middle, between irregular and regular, without consequences. Overstays are a key risk zone. Germany has Schengen rules, and overstaying even by days can affect your ability to re-enter not just Germany but the wider Schengen area. Once you enter irregularity, you may receive formal removal orders, and ignoring them can compound the difficulty of ever coming back legally. Another important detail is the role of identity verification. If your identity is unclear or documents are missing, German authorities can hold you in detention while attempting to confirm your nationality, and that detention can last weeks or months. Families, minors, and vulnerable groups have additional protections, but the machinery does not stop altogether, it simply adjusts. For people currently in Germany or considering it, the safest strategy is proactive. Always renew early, keep your employer fully aligned with your visa terms, and if you plan to switch from study to work, line up contracts and approvals well before your residence card expires. Maintain an unbroken paper trail: leases, insurance, tax records, and payslips. In Germany, paperwork isn't just bureaucracy, it's your shield. If you fall out of compliance, hoping to fix things casually later can backfire badly. Even well-meaning employers sometimes misunderstand sponsorship obligations, so double-check everything against official sources. Ultimately, Germany's place at number 4 reflects this balance. A system that is capable of sudden, large-scale removals when political will aligns, but also one that offers clear, stable legal pathways for those who do things correctly. The lesson is not to gamble. In Germany, diligence is rewarded and sloppiness is penalized. 3. United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has always been a headline player in global immigration discussions, and in recent years it has doubled down on a high-profile enforcement posture. The UK doesn't just enforce quietly, it enforces visibly, making immigration policy and removal activity part of political debate and media coverage. That visibility is one reason the UK lands at number 3. The country operates a system where visa compliance is central. If you're a student, worker, or family migrant, your right to remain is tied precisely to the conditions of your visa. If you breach those conditions, by working too many hours on a student visa, by overstaying after employment ends, or by failing to update your status when your circumstances change, you are not just at risk of eventual denial. You can face removal and a ban on re-entry. The Home Office maintains a detention estate and has repeatedly expanded, contracted, and restructured it depending on the government in power. That means removals are not theoretical, they are real, funded, and sometimes carried out in ways that attract protests and controversy. The UK's enforcement landscape also includes identity verification and compliance visits. Employers and educational institutions are directly tasked with sponsorship duties. A university that doesn't track its international students carefully, or an employer that hires without proper checks, can lose its license. That puts pressure down the chain, and individuals feel it in the form of frequent monitoring. Another factor is the UK's willingness to adjust appeal rights and deadlines. While there are robust legal processes, the government has sought to streamline them, sometimes limiting how much time or how many stages a person has to contest a removal decision. That creates urgency. If you receive a notice, the window to respond is not infinite, and waiting until the last day can close off options. Overstays are particularly dangerous in the UK. Even a short overstay can disrupt future applications. If you apply late, the "out of time" label can follow you for years. People often assume a sympathetic caseworker will overlook a minor delay, but that assumption is misplaced in a system designed to enforce precisely. Similarly, people underestimate the impact of gaps in documentation. Inconsistent addresses, missing bank statements, or failure to prove maintenance funds can trigger refusals that cascade into status loss. One of the most visible enforcement areas in the UK has been irregular channel crossings, and government rhetoric around them has been fierce. That focus raises the general enforcement temperature. Even if you're not in that category, the political environment influences how strictly other categories are treated. For compliant migrants, the best defense is boring but effective. Follow the rules to the letter. Submit applications early, keep every receipt, and avoid informal arrangements that could undermine your record. Students should stick strictly to their permitted work hours. Workers should not shift roles without official variation approval. Families should ensure their relationship proofs are current and credible. The UK offers opportunities, strong universities, vibrant cities, and a major labor market, but it does so on terms that are carefully policed. If you play by those terms, you can thrive. If you stray, the system has no hesitation in enforcing departure. The political incentive is aligned toward visible enforcement, and that is why the UK earns the third spot in our countdown. Not just because removals happen, but because they happen in a way designed to send a message. 2. United States. The United States is vast, complex, and often contradictory in its immigration enforcement. It has both a reputation for opportunity and a reality of large-scale removals that ebb and flow with political cycles. What makes the US stand out at number 2 is sheer scale. The resources, the agencies, and the legal framework all allow for high-volume removals across borders and from the interior of the country. Enforcement occurs on multiple fronts. At the border, expedited removal procedures can return people quickly, especially recent arrivals who do not claim protection or whose claims are rejected. Inside the country, detainers, court orders, and targeted raids by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, can result in removals even for people who have lived in the country for years. A common misconception is that backlogs in immigration courts mean enforcement is toothless. In reality, the backlog is real, but when removal is the outcome, the process can move quickly. For example, individuals with certain criminal records or those who entered recently may find their cases processed under accelerated rules. Another key dynamic is the tension between federal and state or local authorities. Some jurisdictions cooperate closely with ICE, while others limit cooperation, creating a patchwork of enforcement intensity. This patchwork can lead people to underestimate the risk. Living in a so-called sanctuary area does not make you immune, especially if you encounter federal officers or travel across state lines. Overstays are another critical issue in the U.S. Visa overstays account for a large portion of the undocumented population, and while not everyone is targeted, the risk is there. Status violations like working without authorization, studying without the right visa, or failing to maintain SEVIS compliance as a student can put you on the radar. When discovered, those violations can carry not only removal but also bars to future re-entry. Appeals and relief do exist. Asylum, withholding of removal, Convention Against Torture protections, and various waivers provide avenues for some. But those processes are complex, time-sensitive, and highly dependent on legal representation. Without counsel, your odds drop significantly. From a practical standpoint, people in the U.S. need to treat compliance as a daily discipline. Keep your I-94 record, ensure your SEVIS is updated if you're a student, track your visa expiry, and maintain consistent addresses with USCIS. If you switch employers on a work visa, file the correct paperwork rather than assuming it will sort itself out. Avoid the temptation of informal side jobs that don't match your authorization. What seems like easy money now can cost you status later. The United States remains attractive because of its opportunities, but those opportunities come with an enforcement shadow. The scale of removals, the resources behind ICE and CBP, and the political salience of immigration debates all drive a system that acts both symbolically and practically. That is why the US is number 2. Not because every non-compliant person is instantly removed, but because when the system chooses to enforce, it does so at a scale unmatched almost anywhere else. 1. Saudi Arabia. At the very top of our list is Saudi Arabia, a country where the immigration system is tightly linked to the Iqama residency framework and where enforcement is both routine and uncompromising. Unlike in some countries where enforcement feels sporadic, in Saudi Arabia it is systemic. Worksite inspections, roadside checkpoints, and ID verification are part of everyday life for millions of foreign workers. The sponsorship system, or kafala, means that your legal right to remain is directly tied to your employer. If your employer cancels your sponsorship, fails to renew on time, or if you lose your job and do not secure a transfer within the allowed window, your legal status evaporates quickly. From there, detention and deportation are very real possibilities. One of the most notable features of Saudi Arabia's enforcement culture is scale. Reports of mass inspections and detention campaigns are common, particularly in periods when the government announces new labor market initiatives or regularization drives. These campaigns are not hidden, they are visible demonstrations of policy. Workers without valid Iqama cards, those found in jobs not matching their sponsorship category, or individuals overstaying exit re-entry visas can be swept up in large numbers. The rules are clear, and the consequences are swift. Overstays on exit re-entry visas are especially harsh, often resulting in multi-year bans on re-entry. Saudi Arabia does periodically open amnesty windows, during which irregular migrants can leave voluntarily without penalties. But those windows are tightly controlled and time-bound. Missing the deadline can make your situation worse, as authorities often use the end of an amnesty to justify intensified raids and checks. The message is clear: comply during the grace period or face the full weight of enforcement afterward. The country's system is highly digitized in many respects, with the Abshire platform allowing residents to track and update their status. Yet that digital clarity also means you cannot hide. If your employer fails to renew, the system reflects it instantly, and your risk increases the next time you encounter authorities. Daily life under this system requires constant vigilance. Carrying your Iqama card at all times is not optional, it is essential. Workers must be sure their employers fulfill obligations like renewing sponsorship and paying wages, because unpaid wages or disputes can complicate transfers and leave you exposed. Families dependent on the principal worker's Iqama must also ensure their dependent permits are renewed in sync, or else the entire household status can collapse. There are stories of people attempting to live in irregular status for years, but these stories often end with detention, fines, and deportation. The country simply has too many checkpoints and too much routine verification for irregularity to remain hidden forever. What sets Saudi Arabia apart at number 1 is not only the strictness of its rules but the consistency of their application. Unlike countries where enforcement intensity waxes and wanes with politics, in Saudi Arabia it is a constant feature of the landscape. That predictability makes life stable for those who comply. The rules are clear, the processes are transparent in digital systems, and compliant workers can build careers. But it also means there is little margin for error. Miss a renewal, overstay a visa, or drift outside sponsorship, and the consequences arrive swiftly. Saudi Arabia is therefore the ultimate example of a zero-tolerance documentation culture. It rewards meticulous compliance and punishes lapses without hesitation. For millions of workers and their families, the system works because they play by the rules. For those who don't, removal is not a question of if, but when. That is why Saudi Arabia takes the number 1 spot on our countdown. And there you have it, the 10 countries where mass deportations and strict enforcement are most visible right now. From Malaysia's Worksite Raids to Turkey's ID checks, from the UAE's digital fines to the US's massive enforcement machine, and finally Saudi Arabia's uncompromising Iqama system. Each of these countries tells the same story in a different way. Documentation discipline is everything. The lesson here isn't fear, it's awareness. If you're planning to travel, study, or work abroad, know that immigration isn't just about getting a visa. It's about maintaining status every single day. The countries in this countdown reward precision and compliance, and they punish lapses quickly. Whether it's renewing on time, keeping proof of address, or making sure your sponsor fulfills their obligations, the details matter more than you think. Every country has opportunity and every country has rules. The key is to understand both. Some of the strictest systems in this list are also the most rewarding for those who stay compliant. The flip side is that assuming you can drift in a gray zone or fix things casually later is what lands people in detention centers, deportation flights, and long re-entry bans. So now I'll ask you, which country on this list surprised you the most? Did you expect Saudi Arabia to be number 1, or do you think another country should have taken the top spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, I'd love to hear your perspective. If you found this countdown eye-opening, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next breakdown, where we'll dive deeper into the cost of overstays, grace periods, and appeal rights across different regions. Until then, travel smart, live wisely, and always keep your documents in order. See you in the next video.